Elijah had always felt out of place in the world of high art, but that feeling didn't stop him from creating. His passion for painting had begun as a child, born from the simplest of circumstances, a worn-out notebook and a few stray pencils. Back then, it was nothing more than a way to escape the mundane routines of life in the lower rungs of society. But as he grew older, his love for art blossomed into something deeper, more profound. He began seeing patterns in the world, messages hidden in the flow of colors and shapes. What others might dismiss as ordinary, Elijah could see the extraordinary within it. Yet, despite the burning desire to be recognized, Elijah knew the odds were stacked against him. As a young black artist from a working-class family, he had to fight harder than most to even get his foot in the door. His early works were dismissed by galleries and curators who saw him as just another hopeful, with no real understanding of the art world's insular rules. But today was different. Today, Elijah was standing before one of the most prestigious galleries in the city, a space known for cultivating some of the most successful and influential artists in the world. The doors to the gallery swung open with an air of promise, as if they knew that something important was about to happen. But little did Elijah know, the path ahead would not be as welcoming as he hoped. Inside, the gallery was pristine, almost clinical. The walls were stark white, a blank canvas designed to showcase the vivid, chaotic energy of the art pieces hanging neatly in place. There were several visitors, milling around and discussing various works, all wealthy and seemingly absorbed in the world of luxury. Elijah, wearing a simple jacket and jeans, felt like an outsider amidst the polished crowd. His heart raced as he walked toward the receptionist desk, hoping to meet with the gallery owner, Sarah Van Eck. He had been granted a meeting after submitting a portfolio of his work, but he wasn't sure if they had really looked at it. Sarah Van Eck was a well-known name in the art community. Tall, blonde, and poised, she was the type of gallery owner who had a reputation for spotting talent before anyone else. It was said she had a keen eye for value, some called it the Van Eck touch. Sarah had turned her gallery into a profitable empire, discovering many of today's celebrated artists. But Elijah had heard rumors. People whispered that her sharp eye didn't always see people like him, artists from backgrounds like his, people who weren't born with silver spoons in their mouths, whose names weren't easily recognizable. As Elijah stepped into Sarah's office, he was greeted with a warm but calculated smile. Her office was as pristine as the gallery, sleek and minimalistic. She stood up from her desk, extending her hand. "Elijah, right?" she said, her voice smooth and professional, but there was something almost dismissive in her tone. "I must say, I didn't expect someone your age to be so serious about art." Elijah could sense the subtle undercurrent of judgment in her words. He had been in enough galleries to recognize when someone was trying to size him up, trying to decide if he was worth their time. But he wasn't here for small talk or pleasantries. He had a point to prove. "Thank you for meeting with me, Ms. Van Eck," Elijah replied, shaking her hand firmly. "I've been painting for years now, and I believe my work has a unique perspective that could resonate with your audience." Sarah arched an eyebrow, walking to the large window overlooking the city. Her office had a view of the skyline that most people could only dream of. She crossed her arms as she looked out, her back to Elijah for a moment. "Let's see what you've got," she said coolly, gesturing toward the portfolio Elijah had placed on the edge of her desk. Elijah hesitated for a moment before opening the portfolio. Inside were vibrant, yet haunting pieces of art, each one a reflection of his experiences and dreams. His paintings spoke of a world beyond the ordinary, where colors and figures bled into one another, creating surreal landscapes of human emotion and technology intertwined. These were not the predictable abstract pieces that were so common in the high art world. Elijah's work had a certain rawness, an unpredictability that came from his own life experiences, and it had a narrative quality that told stories beyond what the eye could see. Sarah flipped through the pages slowly, her expression unreadable. Elijah's heart pounded in his chest as he waited for her reaction. But what came next was not what he expected. Sarah murmured, her eyes scanning the works, but not really seeing them. "It's interesting, I suppose. But it's not quite what we're looking for right now." The style is chaotic. There's no clear direction. Your brushstrokes are all over the place. It's not refined. Elijah felt a chill creep up his spine. He had heard such critiques before, but they never stung quite this much. There was something about Sarah's words, the casual dismissal, that cut deeper than any critique he had ever received. Refinement comes with time, Elijah said, trying to keep his voice steady. But the message in my work is clear if you take the time to understand it. Sarah glanced up at him, a thin, almost amused smile curling on her lips. Understand it? My dear, I don't need to understand the message. I need to sell the art. And based on what I'm seeing here, I'm not sure there's a market for this. Elijah's jaw tightened, but he held his ground. He had been told that the art world was harsh, but hearing it from someone like Sarah, the epitome of the system that had rejected him, was a slap in the face. Perhaps, you're right, he said, his voice calm, but his eyes burning with quiet determination. But I think you might be missing something. Sarah didn't respond right away. She flicked through the rest of the portfolio with disinterest, clearly eager to get the meeting over with. Finally, she closed it with a soft thud. Well, Elijah, she said, standing up from her chair and walking toward the door, it was interesting. I'll keep your portfolio on file, but I don't think it's a fit for our gallery at this time. Maybe some smaller galleries might be more suited to your style. Elijah stood frozen for a moment. The sting of rejection hit harder than he expected. But as he glanced at the door, the ache in his chest transformed into something else, a quiet determination. This wasn't the end of his journey. It was only the beginning. As he walked out of Sarah's office, he glanced back at the gallery, the place that was supposed to validate his work. But now, it seemed like just another cold, impersonal space. He couldn't shake the feeling that Sarah's dismissal of his art had less to do with its quality and more to do with his background. But Elijah wasn't done yet. He knew that if he could just get the right people to see what he saw in his work, he could make them understand. The world had a funny way of overlooking the hidden gems until it was too late. And Elijah was determined to make sure they wouldn't miss him. The city was alive with the hum of ambition. Elijah had long since learned that in a world where status and money dictated worth, the true essence of something, or someone, could easily be buried beneath layers of shallow judgment. He had come to terms with the fact that the art world might never see his work the way he did. But that didn't matter. His paintings were his voice, his language, to the world. And he would not be silenced, not now, not ever. That night, after the disheartening encounter at Sarah Van Eyck's gallery, Elijah returned to his modest apartment on the outskirts of the city. It was a far cry from the glamorous art studios and swanky penthouses he had envisioned for himself, but it was his sanctuary. Inside, the faint smell of oil paint and turpentine lingered in the air, remnants of his last masterpiece still drying on the canvas propped against the wall. He tossed his bag onto the worn-out couch, the weight of the rejection settling on him like a heavy cloak. He stared at the painting on the wall, a piece he had spent months creating. It was a surreal depiction of a city that didn't exist, its skyline jagged and dreamlike, almost alive with energy. The colors bled into one another, creating an illusion of motion. There were figures in the painting, shadowy yet detailed, and their expressions spoke of loss and hope, of struggle and triumph. It was a deeply personal piece, yet it resonated with a universal truth, the idea that life, like art, was an ever-evolving process of transformation. He walked over to the canvas, his fingers grazing the surface. As he did, something strange happened, a faint shimmer of light seemed to flicker from the painting, as though it was not just a picture, but a living entity responding to his touch. Elijah stepped back, startled. The shimmer faded, leaving only the stillness of the room. He blinked, uncertain if he had imagined it. But his eyes were drawn back to the painting. For some reason, it looked different now. Not in an obvious way, but there was an aura around it, something that transcended the paint and brushstrokes. He studied it for a few moments, trying to make sense of what he was feeling. It wasn't just his imagination. There was something deeper at play. Elijah had always known his art was special, but this was different. It was as if the painting held a secret, something it had been waiting to reveal, something he hadn't yet understood. The next day, Elijah took the painting down from the wall and studied it in the daylight, his gaze moving over each inch of the canvas. His fingers traced the edges of the figures, the lines where the colors met, searching for clues. As he did, a thought crossed his mind, something he had never considered before. What if the art wasn't entirely his own? What if the paintings, in some way, had come to him from somewhere else? It was a ridiculous idea. But the more he thought about it, the more it made sense. Elijah had always felt a certain sense of alienation in his work, as though it came from a place beyond the ordinary. The vivid colors, the strange landscapes, the surreal, dreamlike quality, these were not things he had learned from art school or seen in galleries. They were born from his own mind, sure, but they seemed to echo something ancient, something far more advanced than what should have been possible for a young man from his background. He couldn't ignore the sensation of the painting calling to him, as though it wanted to reveal its true meaning. The more he examined it, the clearer it became that there was something embedded within the layers of paint. The shapes and figures began to align in ways that didn't make sense at first, but soon he realized they formed patterns, a code, perhaps. There were subtle shifts in the lines, a recurring symbol that kept appearing across different pieces of his art. Elijah's pulse quickened. He had always been fascinated by history, particularly the lost civilizations that had vanished before their time. Could his art be somehow tied to that same unknown history? Could these hidden symbols be the key to understanding a truth long buried, perhaps even forgotten? The possibility consumed him. He had to know more. He sat down at his desk, pulling out an old journal he had kept from his youth. It was filled with scribbled notes, sketches, and musings about his work. As he flipped through the pages, a peculiar entry caught his eye. It was a drawing of a structure, a building unlike anything he had ever seen. It resembled ancient architectural designs, but was far more intricate, its edges sharp and almost otherworldly. The caption beside it read, "The Last Beacon." Elijah had completely forgotten about this drawing, but as he studied it now, everything clicked. It was the same symbol he had seen within his recent paintings. The structure, the pattern, the symbolism, it was all connected. And more importantly, it was connected to something far beyond Earth, something far older than any civilization known to mankind. His heart raced as he began to connect the dots. Elijah's art wasn't just a reflection of his inner world. It was a gateway to something else, a hidden truth buried beneath the surface of reality. He was creating not just art, but a map that led to something greater. Something that had been waiting for centuries to be uncovered. Elijah's hands trembled as he grabbed his sketchpad and began to outline the patterns he had discovered. His thoughts raced as he jotted down everything he could remember from the symbols he had seen. He was no longer just an artist, he was a discoverer, a keeper of knowledge that had been passed down through time, disguised as art. As Elijah worked through the night, his mind raced with possibilities. What if this was the breakthrough he had been waiting for? What if his art was not only valuable in terms of its aesthetic appeal, but also held the key to something monumental? A legacy far beyond the confines of the art world. And then, the unimaginable happened. As he sketched the final symbol, the painting in the corner of the room shimmered again. This time, the light was brighter, more intense, almost blinding. Elijah jumped back, eyes wide with disbelief. The painting, it was alive. It was responding to his discovery, to the unlocking of its secret. Suddenly, Elijah understood. The art he had created wasn't just a product of his mind, it was a message, a language from another time, another place. And he had been chosen to decipher it. The room felt colder now, the air thick with the weight of this revelation. Elijah could barely comprehend what he had just uncovered, but one thing was clear, his work was far more important than he could have ever imagined. And someone, or something, was watching him. The following weeks passed in a blur. Elijah's mind was consumed by the discovery of the hidden symbols within his paintings. He had continued to refine his sketches and study the mysterious code embedded within his artwork. The symbols, when pieced together, began to resemble an intricate map, but of what? And why had these designs come to him? Was he truly the creator of this art, or had it been passed down to him through some unseen means? His once quiet apartment had turned into a studio of sorts, piles of journals, sketchpads, and canvases scattered around the room, each one a piece of a larger puzzle he was desperate to solve. But there was an undeniable feeling in the back of his mind that he was not alone in this journey. That somewhere out there, someone, or something, knew exactly what was unfolding. Elijah couldn't shake the sense that his work was more than just art. It was a message, a key to something beyond the ordinary. And if he was right, someone else had to be aware of it. He needed to find out who. It wasn't long before Elijah's hunch was confirmed. One evening, while he was out for a walk, his phone buzzed with a notification. It was an email from an unknown address. Subject: important inquiry about your art. Body: Dear Elijah, I have seen your work. And I believe you have unlocked something far more significant than you realize. I am a patron, and I wish to discuss your paintings further. Please meet me at the Old Imperial Gallery tomorrow at 3 p.m. I trust you will understand the importance of this meeting once you see the details for yourself. Yours sincerely, M. Lancaster. Elijah stared at the email, his pulse quickening. The Old Imperial Gallery? That was one of the most exclusive, secretive galleries in the city, known for dealing with high-profile buyers and collectors from around the world. But this wasn't a typical invitation, it was a summons. There was no doubt in Elijah's mind that this was related to the patterns he had discovered in his work. The timing was too perfect. Someone had been watching him, perhaps even studying his art, before he had come to realize its true potential. He quickly composed a response, eager to find out more. Subject: important inquiry about your art. Body: Dear M. Lancaster, I am intrigued by your message and would be happy to meet with you at the Old Imperial Gallery tomorrow at 3 p.m. I look forward to learning more about your interest in my work. Best regards, Elijah. The next day, Elijah dressed in his finest clothes, a simple yet sharp suit, and made his way to the Old Imperial Gallery. The building was old, with grand columns and an ornate entrance that seemed to whisper of secrets hidden within. As he walked through the doors, he was greeted by a soft, ethereal light that filled the room, casting long shadows across the marble floors. The space was almost empty, save for a few pieces of art on display, their colors muted and subdued in comparison to the vibrant works Elijah had created. At precisely 3 p.m., a figure emerged from the back of the gallery. A tall man, dressed in a dark, tailored suit, with a face partially obscured by the shadows. He moved with an almost otherworldly grace, his presence commanding attention without a single word. Elijah felt a shiver run down his spine, but he held his composure. This was the person he had been waiting for. You must be Elijah, the man said, his voice smooth and deep, with an accent Elijah couldn't quite place. I am M. Lancaster. It's a pleasure to meet you. Elijah extended his hand, but M. Lancaster didn't take it. Instead, the man's eyes flickered to the painting Elijah had brought with him, the one that had started everything. It was wrapped in a simple cloth, but even hidden, its energy seemed to resonate in the room. You brought it, M. Lancaster said, nodding slowly. Good. I knew you would understand. Understand? Elijah asked, his voice laced with curiosity. What exactly do you mean by that? How did you know about my work? M. Lancaster smiled, but there was no warmth in it. I've been following your progress for some time now. Your paintings, they're remarkable. And they hold something far more valuable than you can imagine. Elijah's heart skipped a beat. This was the confirmation he had been waiting for, but the cryptic nature of the conversation only deepened the mystery. He was no longer just an artist, he was a man caught up in something far bigger than he had ever dreamed. I don't understand, Elijah admitted, his voice shaking slightly. What do you mean by valuable? And why me? M. Lancaster stepped closer, his eyes never leaving Elijah's. Your art is not just art. It's a key to something ancient and forgotten. The symbols you've uncovered, they are a map to a source of immense power. A source that, until now, has remained hidden. Elijah's mind raced as the words sank in. Power? Are you saying my art is connected to some kind of treasure? Not a treasure, Lancaster corrected. A force, a power. And it has the potential to change the world, to shift the balance of control over everything. Your paintings, your understanding of the patterns, could unlock a civilization's secrets. Secrets that have been waiting to be discovered for centuries. Elijah's thoughts were reeling. Could it be true? Was his art really more than what it appeared to be? Was it truly a doorway to something beyond his wildest imagination? Lancaster paused, sensing Elijah's skepticism. I understand this is difficult to grasp, but you must trust me. You are on the verge of something monumental, Elijah. The world is not ready for what you've unlocked, but you have the power to change that. And I can help you. The words hung in the air, thick with implication. Elijah could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him, the realization that he was now entangled in something that went beyond the art world. Something that had the potential to alter the course of history. I don't know if I can just hand this over to you, Elijah said, his voice steady but filled with doubt. This is my work, my life's passion. Why should I trust you? Lancaster's eyes softened slightly, and for a moment, he looked almost human. Because you have no choice. You were chosen, Elijah. The moment you picked up that brush, the moment you began to paint, you became a part of something much larger than yourself. And now, it's time for you to decide what you want to do with that power. Elijah's mind was spinning. This man, this patron, seemed to know everything about him, his art, his potential, even his future. He had been chosen, but by whom? For what purpose? As the silence stretched between them, Elijah knew one thing for certain, his life was about to change forever. The path he had been walking on had just branched into something unknown, and he had no idea where it would lead. The days that followed were a blur. Elijah couldn't shake the memory of his meeting with Lancaster. The man's words haunted him like a shadow, whispering of ancient powers, lost civilizations, and a destiny he had never imagined for himself. Every time Elijah thought he had a grasp on the situation, a new question would arise, shattering his sense of certainty. He couldn't ignore the significance of what Lancaster had said. The paintings, the symbols, the connection to something older, something powerful. Elijah had stumbled upon something bigger than himself. He had uncovered a key, a map, but to what end? And at what cost? Lancaster had promised to help Elijah, but the more Elijah thought about it, the more unsettling the situation became. Lancaster was no ordinary patron, there was something far more calculating behind his intentions. Elijah had seen the way Lancaster had looked at him, the way his eyes seemed to see through him. The man was hiding something, and Elijah wasn't sure if he was ready to dive into this world of secrets and power. But there was no turning back. The symbols on his paintings were growing clearer with every passing day, as if they were guiding him towards something. Elijah had spent hours deciphering them, connecting the dots between the paintings, the drawings in his journals, and the cryptic message Lancaster had left him with. Each new discovery only deepened the mystery and intensified the pull he felt toward the unknown. It was late one night when Elijah received another email from Lancaster, this one more urgent. Subject: time is running out. Body: Elijah. You are running out of time. The window to uncover the full extent of what you've discovered is closing. The symbols must be revealed in their entirety, or the opportunity will be lost forever. Meet me tomorrow at the coordinates I've provided. I trust you will understand the gravity of this situation once you see it with your own eyes. Yours, Lancaster. Elijah stared at the coordinates. The location pointed to an old, abandoned building on the outskirts of the city. It was a place he had passed by many times, but had never thought to enter. Something about it felt off, but curiosity outweighed his apprehension. The urgency in Lancaster's email was undeniable, and Elijah felt a strange pull to see this through. The next afternoon, he drove to the location. The building stood in an industrial area, its exterior worn and cracked with age. A sense of desolation hung over the place, and Elijah hesitated for a moment before stepping out of the car. The surrounding streets were eerily quiet, and the wind howled through the broken windows of nearby buildings. There was no sign of life, and the world around him felt frozen in time. As Elijah approached the building, he saw M. Lancaster standing by the door, waiting for him. The man was dressed in the same dark suit as before, his expression unreadable. "Follow me," Lancaster said, his voice low. "And do not ask questions until you see what I have to show you." Elijah followed him inside, his footsteps echoing off the cold concrete floor. The building was dimly lit, the only light coming from a series of old, flickering lamps. As they walked deeper into the space, Elijah noticed large metal doors lining the walls, each one bearing strange symbols and markings, symbols that looked strikingly similar to the ones in his paintings. "Do you see them?" Lancaster asked, turning to face Elijah. "These are the markers. They're the same ones you've been painting." Elijah nodded, his throat dry. "What is this place? What's behind these doors?" Lancaster didn't answer right away. Instead, he led Elijah to the farthest door, which was larger and more ornate than the others. It seemed to pulse with energy, as though it was alive. The markings on it shimmered faintly, and Elijah could feel an inexplicable force drawing him toward it. "This is the entrance," Lancaster said, his voice almost reverent. "What lies behind it is the source of everything you've been uncovering. The power, the knowledge, the secret history of the world. It's all here." Elijah felt his pulse quicken. "But, why me? Why am I the one who's seeing this?" Lancaster turned and looked at him with cold, calculating eyes. "You were chosen, Elijah. Your art wasn't just created by chance, it was the key to unlocking this. You were always meant to find it." Before Elijah could respond, Lancaster pushed open the door. The room beyond was vast and cavernous, filled with strange machinery and ancient artifacts. At the center of the room stood a massive stone pedestal, on top of which was an object covered by a dark cloth. The air around it shimmered with energy, and Elijah felt a powerful sense of awe and fear wash over him. "This is what we've been looking for," Lancaster said, his voice filled with reverence. "The artifact that will change everything. It has the power to reshape the world. And you, Elijah, are the one who can wield it." Elijah approached the pedestal cautiously, his eyes locked on the covered object. A sense of inevitability hung in the air, and he felt as though he was standing on the precipice of something monumental. His entire life had led him to this moment, to this discovery. Lancaster stepped forward and slowly removed the cloth, revealing the object beneath. It was a stone tablet, engraved with the same symbols that had appeared in Elijah's paintings. The tablet seemed to hum with energy, and Elijah's fingers itched to touch it. It was as if the tablet was calling to him, urging him to unlock its secrets. "This is it," Lancaster said, his voice hushed. "The source. The key to everything." Elijah reached out, his hand trembling as it hovered over the tablet. He could feel the power radiating from it, and he knew, without a doubt, that touching it would change his life forever. But as his fingers brushed the surface of the stone, a sudden flash of light erupted from the tablet, blinding him. He staggered back, his vision blurred. When the light finally faded, Elijah found himself standing in an entirely different place. The room around him had vanished, replaced by an alien landscape, vast, barren, and filled with strange, towering structures that seemed to defy the laws of physics. The sky was a deep, swirling shade of purple, and a faint hum filled the air. "Elijah," a voice said, but it wasn't M. Lancaster's voice. It was deeper, more resonant, and echoed as though it came from every direction. "You have unlocked the first step." The realization hit him like a hammer. He wasn't just in some hidden room. He had been transported, pulled into another world, another dimension, perhaps. "Where am I?" Elijah whispered, his voice barely audible. "This is the place from which the symbols came. The source of the power you have uncovered. You are standing on the threshold of something ancient, something far older than humanity. As the voice faded, Elijah was left standing alone in the alien landscape, unsure of what was real and what was merely an illusion. One thing was clear, his life had been irrevocably changed. Elijah stood in the strange alien landscape, the air thick with an unearthly hum. His mind reeled, trying to make sense of what had just happened. One moment, he had been in the abandoned building with M. Lancaster, and the next, he was here, on what appeared to be another world entirely. The stone tablet, now resting in his hands, pulsed faintly, its symbols glowing as though alive. It was the key, but to what? The voice that had spoken to him, resonating from all directions, echoed in his mind. You are standing on the threshold of something ancient. The source of the power you have uncovered. But what did that mean? What was this place? And why had the tablet brought him here? As his senses adjusted to the strange atmosphere, Elijah's eyes scanned the surroundings. Towering structures made of an unfamiliar material rose from the ground, their surfaces reflecting the alien sky. Some of the buildings seemed to float, defying gravity, while others were made of intricate, organic-looking patterns that pulsed with light. The landscape was barren but beautiful, vast stretches of land dotted with jagged rock formations and strange, luminescent plants that seemed to be alive, shifting and reacting to his presence. Suddenly, Elijah's attention was drawn to a figure standing in the distance. It was a humanoid shape, silhouetted against the glowing horizon. The figure seemed to move toward him, and as it got closer, Elijah could see it was not human. The being was tall, slender, and ethereal, with glowing markings running down its limbs, similar to the symbols on the tablet. Its eyes were large and liquid, filled with an intelligence that made Elijah feel both terrified and awestruck. You've come, the figure said, its voice soft but commanding. It was a deep, melodic tone, unlike any human voice Elijah had ever heard. It sounded ancient, as if the being's words carried the weight of centuries. Elijah's throat tightened. Where am I? He managed to ask. Who are you? We are the elders of the first civilization, the being replied. You stand in the heart of what remains of our world. The words sent a chill down Elijah's spine. The first civilization? He had no frame of reference for such a concept, but there was a familiarity to it, something that tugged at the very core of his being. I don't understand, Elijah said. I was just in a gallery, and then I found the tablet. Now, I'm here. How is this possible? The elder studied him carefully, its eyes gleaming with an understanding that made Elijah feel as though he was being seen in ways he couldn't comprehend. The tablet is a link, it said. A bridge between your world and ours. You unlocked it, Elijah, by deciphering the symbols in your art. You were always meant to find us. But why me? Elijah asked, his voice shaking. Why was I chosen? The elder stepped closer, its presence overwhelming in a way that was both comforting and unsettling. You are a descendant of those who once shared this world with us. The symbols you've been painting are not just art, they are encoded memories, fragments of history passed down through generations. You are the key to restoring what was lost. Elijah's heart raced. Restoring what? What happened here? The elder paused, its gaze turning somber. Our civilization, once the most advanced in the universe, was brought to ruin. We created the tablet as a safeguard, a means of passing on our knowledge and power. But we were betrayed. Those who coveted our power turned on us, seeking to control what we had created. A great war followed, and our world was destroyed. Elijah's mind was spinning. This was more than he had ever expected to uncover. The tablet was connected to a civilization that had existed before humanity, a civilization that had fallen due to betrayal and war. And somehow, he was the one who had unlocked its secrets. What do you want from me? Elijah asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I'm just an artist. I don't understand any of this. The elder reached out, its long fingers brushing Elijah's arm. You are not just an artist. You are the vessel. You hold the key to our resurrection. Only you can use the tablet to restore what has been lost. Only you can unlock the full potential of the power we created. Elijah took a step back, his head spinning. This was too much to take in. He had only wanted to create art, to express himself through his paintings. But now he found himself at the center of an ancient mystery, the fate of an entire civilization resting on his shoulders. How can I do this? Elijah asked, feeling the weight of responsibility settle over him like a heavy cloak. How can I possibly restore something that I don't even understand? The elder's eyes glowed brighter, as if they were filled with ancient knowledge. You must trust in yourself, Elijah. The tablet has chosen you, because you are the one who can unlock its full potential. The symbols you have painted are more than just patterns, they are a map, a guide. You must continue to decipher them, follow their path, and the power will reveal itself. Elijah looked down at the tablet in his hands. It was warm now, almost alive, and the symbols were shifting again, their patterns changing with each passing second. It was as if the tablet was responding to his thoughts, guiding him towards something greater than he had ever imagined. But how could he use this power? What would it cost him? He wasn't ready for this, he wasn't ready for the responsibility of saving or destroying an entire civilization. The elder seemed to sense his hesitation. The choice is yours, Elijah. You have already taken the first step. The rest will unfold as you allow it to. Elijah stood in silence for a long moment, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. The voice in his mind, the voice of the elder, was still with him, urging him forward, but Elijah couldn't shake the fear that gripped him. What if he wasn't strong enough? What if he failed? But then, a memory flashed in his mind, the memory of his first painting, the one that had started it all. The passion he had felt when he created it, the drive to communicate something deeper, something beyond words. Perhaps that same passion, that same desire to understand, could guide him now. He raised the tablet higher, feeling its power surge through him. The elder stepped back, watching him with a mixture of hope and expectation. Elijah, the elder said softly, remember, there is no turning back now. With those words, Elijah's journey had truly begun. Elijah stood alone in the alien landscape, the tablet glowing faintly in his hands. The elder had stepped back, waiting, watching as if the very fate of their world depended on what he would do next. There was no denying the weight of his new reality. What had once been a simple journey to discover the meaning behind his art was now a responsibility greater than he had ever imagined. His mind was still reeling from everything he had learned, the destruction of the first civilization, the betrayal that had caused its fall, and the incredible power locked within the tablet. He had always believed that art was a form of expression, a way to communicate emotion and ideas, but now he was realizing that his work was something much more profound. It had been a conduit to something ancient and powerful, a key to unlocking secrets that had been buried for millennia. The elder's voice echoed in his mind, urging him to continue deciphering the symbols on the tablet. The path is laid before you, Elijah. You have unlocked the first step. Now, you must follow it to its end. But what did that mean? Elijah couldn't help but feel overwhelmed. He was an artist, not a historian or a scholar. How could he possibly understand the magnitude of the task before him? The fear of failure loomed over him like a shadow, threatening to swallow him whole. He glanced back at the elder, whose eyes were filled with an almost palpable expectation. The being didn't speak, but its presence seemed to convey a deep trust, as if it knew that Elijah was capable of something far greater than he could understand. With a deep breath, Elijah turned his attention back to the tablet. The symbols were shifting again, the lines and shapes pulsating as though they were alive. His fingers hovered over them, tracing the patterns with a sense of reverence. The symbols seemed to respond to his touch, each one more vivid and intricate than before. It was as if they were guiding him, urging him to continue his exploration. Suddenly, a flash of light erupted from the tablet, blinding him for a moment. When the light faded, Elijah found himself standing in a completely different place. The landscape around him had changed once again, but this time it felt more familiar, more human. He was standing in the ruins of a once great city. The architecture was ancient, but unmistakably human in design. Crumbling buildings surrounded him, their walls covered in strange symbols that matched those on the tablet. It was clear that this was no ordinary city, it was a place from the past, a place that had been lost to time. Elijah's heart raced as he took in the scene. This was a glimpse into the past, a fragment of history that had been lost to the ages. He could almost feel the echoes of those who had lived here, their presence lingering in the air. As he explored the ruins, he discovered what appeared to be a central plaza, where a large stone structure stood. At its base, there was a circular indentation that seemed to perfectly match the shape of the tablet. Elijah felt a surge of recognition. This was the next step. This was where the tablet was meant to go. With a sense of purpose, Elijah approached the stone structure and placed the tablet into the indentation. The moment his hands made contact with the stone, a powerful energy surged through him, almost knocking him off his feet. He staggered back, gripping the tablet tightly as the ground beneath him trembled. The ruins around him seemed to come alive, the symbols on the walls glowing with an otherworldly light. The air hummed with energy, and Elijah could hear the faint whisper of voices, as if the long-dead inhabitants of this place were trying to communicate with him. It was an overwhelming experience, as if he were standing at the crossroads of time itself. And then, everything went silent. A figure appeared before him, a tall, regal being, dressed in flowing robes adorned with the same glowing symbols that had been etched into the tablet. It was another elder, but this one radiated a sense of power and wisdom far beyond the being Elijah had encountered earlier. "Welcome, Elijah," the elder said, its voice resonating with the authority of a ruler. "You have unlocked the second step. You have proven yourself worthy." Elijah stared at the figure in awe. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice trembling with the weight of the moment. "I am one of the original architects of this civilization," the elder replied. "I was among those who created the tablet and designed the symbols that now guide you. You are standing in the heart of what remains of our greatest achievement, the city where we first unlocked the power of the stars." Elijah felt a chill run down his spine. "You mean, you were the ones who created all of this?" he asked, gesturing to the ruins around him. "The power? The tablet? The symbols?" The elder nodded. "Yes. We were the first to harness the energy of the universe, to bend it to our will. We built this city as a center of learning, a place where our knowledge and power could be shared with the rest of the galaxy. But we were betrayed, just as the elder before me told you. Our enemies sought to control what we had created, and they destroyed everything we built. But why am I here?" Elijah asked, his voice filled with confusion. "I'm just an artist. I don't know anything about this power. I don't know how to fix what happened." The elder's gaze softened, and for a brief moment, it almost seemed as though the being was looking at him with compassion. "You are here because you were chosen. The tablet has chosen you, Elijah. You have the ability to unlock the full potential of the power we once wielded. The symbols you've painted are more than just art. They are the blueprint for restoring what was lost. You are the key." Elijah shook his head. "I don't understand. How can I possibly restore something so immense? I don't even know where to start." The elder's expression grew serious. "The first step is always the hardest. You have already unlocked 2 pieces of the puzzle, Elijah. The path is laid before you. Continue to decipher the symbols, and you will unlock the power within you." Elijah stared at the elder, his mind swirling with questions. How could he possibly live up to such an impossible task? But deep down, he knew that there was no turning back. The fate of this ancient civilization, and perhaps his own, rested in his hands. With a deep breath, Elijah nodded. "I'll do it," he said, his voice filled with determination. "I'll uncover the rest. I'll restore what was lost." The elder's eyes gleamed with approval. "Then you have already taken the final step. The path ahead may be difficult, but you are not alone. We are with you, Elijah. Always." And with that, the figure vanished, leaving Elijah standing alone in the ruins. But he no longer felt alone. The weight of the task ahead still pressed on him, but now he felt a sense of purpose, a sense that he was part of something much bigger than himself. The symbols on the tablet began to glow once more, and Elijah knew that the next step of his journey was about to unfold. Elijah stood in the center of the ancient city, the weight of the elder's words echoing in his mind. You are the key. He had heard them before, but now they resonated with a deeper meaning. He was no longer just an artist, trying to make a name for himself with his paintings. He was part of something far greater, a bridge between his world and the remnants of a once mighty civilization. The symbols on the tablet, the ancient knowledge, it all had a purpose, and he was the one meant to unlock it. As he glanced around the ruins, the air was thick with a sense of ancient power. The city was silent now, but it felt alive in a way he could not fully explain. The buildings, though crumbled and worn by time, seemed to pulse with energy, as though they were waiting for him to unlock the final piece of the puzzle. The tablet in his hands glowed with an ethereal light, its symbols shifting and swirling as though reacting to his very thoughts. It was guiding him, leading him toward the end of the journey. Elijah knew that the last step was approaching. He could feel it in the air, in the weight of the tablet, in the glow of the symbols. This was no longer just about restoring the first civilization, it was about discovering something that had been hidden for millennia, something that had the power to change everything. With a deep breath, Elijah began to walk toward the central structure, where the tablet had been placed earlier. The stone surface where he had placed it still hummed with energy, and as he neared it, he could see the final pattern emerging on the tablet. It was different now, more intricate, more complex than any of the symbols he had deciphered before. He could feel it in his bones, this was the last key. He knelt before the stone indentation and placed the tablet into the groove once more. The moment it made contact with the surface, the ground beneath him trembled. Elijah braced himself, his heart pounding in his chest. The air grew thick with energy, and the symbols on the walls of the ruins began to glow brighter, pulsating in rhythm with his heartbeat. Suddenly, there was a flash of light, and the world around him seemed to distort, bending and shifting. For a moment, it was as though time itself had fractured. Elijah closed his eyes, trying to steady himself, but the sensation was overwhelming. When he opened his eyes again, everything had changed. The ruins were gone. The city had been restored, its once proud structures now standing tall and majestic. The streets were alive with activity, beings of all shapes and sizes, many of them humanoid, others completely alien, moved through the city, engaged in various tasks. It was a thriving metropolis, just as it had been in its prime. Elijah stood at the center of it all, staring in awe at the reborn city. The sky above was a swirling kaleidoscope of colors, an alien sunset that bathed everything in a warm, golden glow. The air was filled with the hum of advanced technology, the sounds of a civilization that had mastered the stars. But as he looked closer, he realized that the beings around him were not just ordinary people, they were the elders, the creators of the first civilization. They were standing in front of him, their faces filled with a mixture of reverence and gratitude. "You have done it, Elijah," one of them said, stepping forward. It was the same elder who had first guided him, but now it seemed even more powerful, more real, as though it had transcended its earlier, ethereal form. "You have restored our world. The power we once wielded is now yours." Elijah could hardly believe what he was hearing. He had done it. He had restored the first civilization to its former glory. The symbols on the tablet had unlocked not just knowledge, but the very essence of what had been lost, its people, its technology, its way of life. It was all here, reborn, because of his actions. But as he looked at the elder, a new question formed in his mind. "What happens now?" Elijah asked, his voice filled with uncertainty. "What do I do with this power?" The elder smiled, its eyes glowing with ancient wisdom. "You, Elijah, are the bearer of our knowledge. You have the ability to shape the future of your world, of all worlds. The power you have unlocked is not just ours, it is the key to the future of the universe. You must choose how to wield it." The weight of those words hit Elijah like a ton of bricks. This was it. He had been given the power to change everything. The knowledge of the first civilization was at his fingertips, and he could use it to shape the future of his world, or he could let it fall into the wrong hands. The possibilities were endless, and the responsibility was immense. The elder continued, "You must be careful, Elijah. The power you now possess is not meant to be used lightly. There will be those who will seek to control it, to use it for their own ends. It is up to you to decide who is worthy of this knowledge and who will be left in the dark." Elijah's mind was racing. He was no longer just an artist, no longer just a man with a passion for painting. He was now the steward of an ancient civilization's legacy, the key to unlocking a new era for the universe. It was a burden, but it was also an opportunity. The elder extended its hand to him. "Will you accept this responsibility, Elijah? Will you be the guardian of this power, the protector of what has been restored?" For a long moment, Elijah stood there, considering the weight of the decision before him. He thought of the world he came from, the gallery, the people who had mocked him, the struggles he had faced as a black artist. And then he thought of the power he had just unlocked, the potential for change, for justice, for a future where humanity could thrive alongside the stars. Finally, Elijah stepped forward and took the elder's hand. "I accept," he said, his voice steady and resolute. "I will use this power to protect what is right, to ensure that no one misuses it." The elder nodded, its expression filled with pride. "You are ready, Elijah. The future is now in your hands." And with those words, the world around him began to shift once more. The once dying city, the ruins that had been lost to time, had now been reborn as a thriving civilization. The possibilities were limitless, and the future lay before Elijah like an uncharted map, waiting for him to lead the way. But as the elder's form began to fade into the light, one final thought crossed Elijah's mind: he was no longer just an artist. He was a guardian, a protector of something much greater than himself. And the universe would never be the same,